I'm going to be dead here in a few moments. 3, 4 times blessed my friends in arms who died on the plains of Troy those years ago, serving the sons of Atreus to the end. Better to have died at the walls of Troy. Would to God, he says, I died there too and met my fate that day. The Trojans, swarms of them, hurled at me with bronze spears, fighting over the corpse of proud Achilles. It is interesting that when Odysseus is about to die, he mentions Achilles, his friend, and the fact they had to fight over the corpse of Achilles after Achilles was dead. Then we're told a hero's funeral. Then Achilles' funeral. Remember, they mingled the ashes of Patroclus and Achilles together. My glory spread by comrades. Now what a wretched death! I'm doomed to die. In other words, Odysseus says, I'm going to die out here on the ocean. I'm going to get no kleos, no glory of any kind. Right? Then a massive wave comes, smashes against him. Off he goes for a while, dragging all of his clothes, like Achilles in the river, this fight. And Achilles, remember, is almost ready to drown and die as well. If it's not for Ino, who will help him? So let's put it in our notes. Several times Odysseus has to have women to save him. This is a fascinating element of this poem. First it's Ino, a little nymph here, who will say to him at line 672, poor man, she says to him, why is the god of earthquakes so dead set against you? Then she gives him this scarf. She says at line 380, take the scarf, tie it around your waist, it's immortal, nothing to fear now. In other words, it will help you, okay? And she hands him the scarf. But we're told at line 390, that Odysseus weighed the two courses. Now I want to pause in our notes. This is a pivotal moment. Write this down. One of the things that defines Odysseus and his skepticism or his doubt is that he always is stuck between two possible options. When we meet the story of Scylla and Charybdis, we'll understand what it means to say between a rock and a hard place, okay? When we meet Odysseus, we're constantly meeting a character who is always weighing two possible options. Let's hear him say it now at line 390 and following. Battle-weary Odysseus weighed two courses, deeply torn, probing his fighting spirit. Oh no, he says, I fear another immortal weaves a snare to trap me, urging me to abandon ship, because I know said, just jump off the ship and use my scarf. He says, I won't, not yet. And so he decides, I'm going to stick it out on the boat, the raft. One more colossal wave, we're told, smashes, and off he goes, right? Poseidon then will leave, because he uses the scarf that Io gave to him. Poseidon will leave Odysseus alone, and off he will go. And Athena then will show up to give some kind of help and encouragement, right? And we're told at line 430 or so that he drifts for 2 days, and on the third day, finally, he sees landfall just ahead. Joy, and then we're told in an interesting epic simile at line 435, joy when he sees land, warm as, now here comes the simile, the joy that children feel when they see their father's life drawn again, one who's lain on a sickbed, racked with torment, wasting away slowly under some angry power's onslaught, then what joy when the gods deliver him from his pains. So, the end of the epic simile, warm Odysseus' joy when he saw that shore. What an amazing epic simile. Odysseus has been swimming now for 3 days, sees the shore, and the joy that he feels is the joy children feel when their father comes back from near death. Think about how that's going to work with Telemachus later in the poem. It's a brilliant insight, right? Very quickly, we're told Odysseus gets close to the shoreline, and yet the waves are going to destroy him. And at line 450, he will speak again to himself. Worse and worse, he says. Now that Zeus has granted a glimpse of land beyond my hopes, now I've crossed this waste of water, the end in sight. There's no way out of the boiling surf. I see no way. Rugged reefs offshore, round them breakers roaring. He says, what am I supposed to do? For example, he says, again, we're caught between two possibilities. If I clamber out, some big comber will host me. If I keep on swimming down the coast trying to find a seabed shelving, he says, I could just drown. Or he says, some dark power will loose some monster on me, right? In other words, he says, I've got no way out of this. What am I going to do? It's at this point that Pallas Athena, right, will give him some confidence. He will hang on, and ultimately he will make his land fall. Right at line 490, he will pray to the river god, Hear me, Lord, whoever you are. I've come to you, the answer to all my prayers. Rescue me from the sea Lord's curse. Even immortal gods will show a man respect. Whatever wanderer seeks their help like me. I throw myself on your mercy, on your current now. I have suffered greatly. Pity me, Lord. Your supplicant cries for help. So Odysseus is having to ask for help. We will see this as a motif of Odysseus a number of times in the books 5, 6, 7, and 8. This kind of heart of when we first meet Odysseus for the first time, right? He will give Ino back, at line 5:10, Ino back the scarf that saved him, and then struggling from the banks, flung himself in the deep reeds, kissed the good green earth, and then he begins to speak to himself again at line 5:15. Man of misery, he calls himself. What next? Is this the end? If I wait out, notice this either or option. If I wait out a long tense night by the banks, I fear the sharp frost and the soaking dew together will do me in. I'm bone weary, about to breathe my last, right? And a cold wind blows from the river on toward morning. But what if I climb that slope, go for the dark woods, and bed down in the thick brush? What if I'm spared the chill fatigue and a sweet sleep comes my way? I fear wild beasts will drag me off his quarry. In other words, he says, I don't know what to do. I'm between two options, and neither of those two options look very good. For those of you who followed my Harvard Classics lectures on this, the different Greek tragedies, you know that oftentimes we will find this kind of thing happening, right? There's no legitimate option. Either way, you're pretty much jacked. Finally, we're told at the very end of this book that at line 540, long enduring Odysseus, overjoyed at the sight of finding a place where he can bedded down in the midst and heaps of the leaves around him, so he kind of gets down in these leaves so he can get some warmth. And we're told that an interesting epic simile, as a man will bury his glowing brand in black ashes, off on a lonely farmstead, no neighbors near, to keep a spark alive, no need to kindle fire from somewhere else, so great Odysseus buried himself in leaves, and Athena showered sleep upon his eyes, sleep in a swift wave. Interesting, the irony of the word wave, because it's what jacked him, right? Delivering him from all his pains and labors, blessed sleep that sealed his eyes. At last. So we come to the very end of the book, and this is in some ways kind of a window into the struggles of Odysseus for the last 20 years. He is a man of twists and turns, right? And we kind of get to experience it with Odysseus because, of course, he loves to ask himself, what is next? I mean, it's such terrible things happening to me all the time. You'll remember the Odyssey question is, why does bad stuff happen to good people? This will be Odysseus' question all the way through. All right, let's jump to level 2 and 3 quickly and finish now with book 5. At 2a, well, to achieve great things, right? Sometimes there's great pain. Sometimes there's great struggle. Nietzsche's that which does not destroy me makes me stronger, right? Another message is the gods and their playthings or their play toys, right? Humans are just kind of the toys of the gods. You'll remember in Shakespeare's Lear, it was humans are like flies to the gods, right? Okay. Another major message is life is a series of challenges. From the frying pan into the fire, we kind of get that sense. We're reminded of Whitman's famous lines from Song of the Open Road at the very end about there always being a greater struggle necessary. The leap of faith is another major project. Ino told Odysseus, put on the scarf, jump out into the waters, you'll be fine. Well, that's kind of hard for Odysseus to do, right? I mean, it's hard for a skeptic to take the leap of faith. There's a great existentialist thinker that we'll mention in a bit named Kierkegaard who plays the same game in his text either or. That is to say, to take the jump, to take the leap, right? Odysseus has always got his two choices. At level 2b, well, the symbolism here, there's several we can point out. Calypso is, of course, a fond distraction. She is going to keep him in prison. Even though he's with this drop-dead gorgeous woman, he's still in prison because he can't leave. He can't do the things he wants to do. Odysseus is obviously a symbol as well of a man of action who is stuck. Kind of like Achilles in his tent. Let's put that in our notes, right? Achilles, a man of great action, is also stuck in the Iliad, for much of the Iliad in his tent, right? Poseidon is the symbol of the power of the gods. The limits on that power as well, right? Because he can't kill Odysseus even if he would like to. The irony at 2b, the irony is that Calypso says she's all compassion. In other words, yeah, right. She's forced to do this. Also, we're, of course, thinking about love as possession, right? There's that famous line, if you love something, set it free, and it'll come back to you. Poor Calypso, she will set free Odysseus. He ain't never coming back, is he? Of course, the other irony that we pointed out already is that Odysseus, the greatest liar, never trusts anyone because, of course, always wondering about whether they're being lied to or not. Let's jump to level 3 really quickly. Let's think about the Iliad for just a moment. We have commented about Achilles as being alone in Book 9 and fighting the river in Book 22. We'll see some real similarities. You remember that Achilles said in Book 9, I hate that man, as I do the gates of Hades, right, who says one thing and hides another in his heart. It's not that Odysseus hates that man, it's that Odysseus fears that man, or, of course, woman. Goddess especially, right? Of course, in the Iliad we have Athena versus Athena, right? Trying to decide here, who she will help, who she won't help. Here in the Odyssey, of course, she's very helpful to Odysseus. In the Iliad, you sometimes don't have that level of help always, right? She's far more involved in the Odyssey, isn't she? How about this one? Athena versus Zeus. Notice we got the same game getting played in the Iliad, only here, notice it's Zeus who says, you have the power here, right? At 3a, think about an epic hero who was challenged to survive. Somehow, maybe escapes, maybe doesn't escape. When we study our Beowulf, for example, in Beowulf 2, fighting against Grendel's mom, almost dies. Beowulf 3, fighting against the dragon, he does die. When we do our Song of Roland, we'll see a hero who struggles but ultimately dies. When we do Aeneas in the Aeneid, in Virgil's Aeneid, we'll have a hero who struggles, doesn't die, however, he's able to make it through. When we do Dante in the Inferno and Dante the Pilgrim, he's got to struggle, and ultimately he's like done. In fact, sounding very much like Odysseus, he will sit down and say, I'm finished, and it will be, of course, Virgil, his guide, who says, up on your feet. This is no time to tire, right? The anti-example of a hero who struggles to survive is, of course, Milton's Satan in Paradise Lost and Goethe's Faust. Both of these are kind of like anti-heroes of this motif. We already mentioned it, but let's hit it again. Odysseus Is Self-Talk. Here we will find those soliloquies of Hamlet, for example, when Odysseus is speaking out loud to himself, trying to figure stuff out. We've also mentioned this idea about Kierkegaard. Let's go ahead and play the game really quickly. In philosophic study, a system of thinking that was very prevalent at the beginning of the 20th century is what we call existentialism. I'll just give you an idea that you can run down on your own. Kierkegaard, a famous Danish philosopher, made it kind of really famous by talking about the challenge of faith as being, in his text, either or, an option between two different positions and a required leap of faith. Odysseus having to take his, obviously, here. In this strand of existentialism, Dostoevsky, the great Russian writer, and his brothers Karamazov, in the Grand Inquisitor's scene, as it's referred to, and we'll have a lecture here later on that one, same game getting played of having to make the choice. Finally, Nietzsche, in his classic text, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, as well as Twilight of the Gods, that which does not destroy me makes me stronger, right? The idea of writing in Twilight of the Idols, Nietzsche's writing about somehow surviving military academy and he hated it, and this is the famous line, right? Or, how about this one for a 3A observation? I referenced it, but let's now listen to it. Whitman in Song of the Open Road, Whitman, who loved his Homer, who recited lines from Homer to the ocean, we're told. And in fact, you'll see this quote on LearnStrong on the homepage because it's such an important quote for all of us to remind ourselves what Odysseus is learning himself. Whitman says it this way at the end of Song of the Open Road. Now, he says, understand me well. It's provided in the essence of things that from any fruition of success, no matter what, shall come forth something to make a greater struggle necessary. Well, of course, I recommend that you memorize a line like this. It is, of course, the Odyssey in terms of the lesson of no matter what success you have. So, for example, Odysseus finally makes it off the island of Calypso, falls into the sea. Oh, this is just great. Finally makes it out of the ocean onto the island, and then what's next? Well, got another struggle. Another struggle is always coming. In other words, no matter what benchmark you set for yourself as a really important goal, there's always going to be another struggle. There has to be another struggle. We want the struggle, even though, of course, The struggle is sometimes the thing we seem to not want at all. Another way to say this, obviously, at 3b is pain is a propedeutic. Okay, so I'll ask this question. When was the time you had to swim for your life, right? What was the time you had to keep the spark alive? I remember once in my coaching years, I had a young daughter who had just been watching that show Nemo, and I was clearly in a rough patch in the season, and my daughter said, "Don't worry, Daddy, just keep swimming." Well, there it is, right? For those of you that know that, yeah, some of you are smiling, right? Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Obviously, Odysseus played the game. What was the time you needed help? I think of Ino Scar, for example, to survive. You needed the help. You had to have something to help you kind of get through the experience. What was a time that success for you led to a greater struggle? In other words, you worked really hard, for example, to be the varsity starter on a sport team, and then all of a sudden an injury happened and you had another challenge. Or it wasn't an injury, it was success. You actually won the season, and then you had to have the next challenge. What was the time that happened for you? How about this one? What was the time you had to leave love? Think about Calypso and Odysseus. I mean, it's very quickly kind of patched over. It's clear, though, that Calypso is very much into Odysseus. Odysseus has decided to turn down immortality? Whoa. I mean, in Greek epics, this is always the goal. Every mortal wants to be immortal, and yet for Odysseus, he's going to turn it down so that he can come back to Ithaca and come back to his Penelope and to his son Telemachus. A sign of love, right? And what's it like to leave, then, a situation like he has with Calypso? What do you imagine that was for Calypso, right? Well, speaking of love, since we're there, let's now go to Odysseus in Book 6. The next morning, he's going to wake up and he's going to see the beautiful young Narcissa, right? And she will do what any woman does when any woman meets Odysseus for the first time. Every woman that meets Odysseus seems to want Odysseus, right? And all he wants, right, home and Penelope. We're going to have another great book in the next book of speeches. We're going to get some great speeches, some remarkable rhetoric. So let's go ahead and go to the next book and enjoy it. I hope you're enjoying this as much as am I. Thank you.